My dad is a chair. Yes, this is true. My dad is a chair. To be specific, he's a fully upholstered bright orange angel accent living room chair. The kind with wooden legs you'd find in any three-piece suit from the 70s. He's pretty comfortable, truth be told. A little lumpy in places, but his padding is soft. Warm too. He's always warm. There's also the telltale BA thump BA thump BA thump coming from his back cushion. A steady rhythm at my lumbar to remind me I'm sitting in no ordinary chair. He wasn't always a chair. Until last year, he was Kevin the accountant. He was 51, slightly overweight, and generally seemed to enjoy life as a human. He was married to Mom. He still is, but, well, as you can imagine, it's a little complicated now. It was funny at first. He came home from work one day and just sat in a corner of the living room. When we'd ask him why he was sitting on the floor and not the $4,000 cream leather couch, he'd just smile and say, "It feels right here." It stopped being funny the morning he didn't go to work. Turns out he hadn't slept the night before. He'd been watching a movie with Mom but hadn't gone with her to bed. She left him sitting in his spot, unsuspicious of the "I'm not tired, I'll be up a little later" lie. She and I both begged him to get up, but he refused to move. Phoned in sick at work, the whole deal. Just spent the day sitting on the floor in his corner. We kept asking him what was wrong, why he wouldn't get up except to use the bathroom, and he just kept saying no, this feels right. Mom phoned the doctor around the third day of this. He'd stopped eating or drinking, you see. Stopped getting up to use the bathroom too. Surprisingly though, there weren't as many accidents as you'd think. Once he'd allowed the last of the food and drink to leave him, it seemed to stop coming. We also didn't hear his belly growl despite going a day and a half without food. The doctor couldn't make sense of it. Their first guess was that it was psychosomatic, but that wouldn't explain the absence of digestive activity exposed by the stethoscope. They said they'd be back to take some blood samples in a few days after they liaised with some colleagues. Unfortunately, as I said, this was last year. 2020. We never heard back from the doctor thanks to the virus that shall not be named. I guess guy with gut troubles who refuses to move is low on the priorities list during a global pandemic. Somehow Mom managed to wrangle long-term sick leave with Dad's company. Decades of loyal employeeism combined with Mom's attendance of every company barbecue and softball game helped Mr. Bannerfrag by the unexplained stomach concern requiring hospitalization excuse. I'll never forget that phone call. At the time, Dad losing his job was the worst-case scenario for both of us. He'd always been the breadwinner. Neither of us could support ourselves without him. We'd lose the house in under a year. Dad didn't seem too perturbed by Mom's frantic pacing, or the lies she wormed through the phone to Mr. Bannerfrag. He just stared at the wall serenely, hovering his butt half a foot from the carpet, balancing with his legs bent and his hands flat on the ground behind him. That night I fell asleep listening to Mom yelling at Dad. He never yelled back. We started noticing the physical changes a few days later. That's when we realized this wasn't psychosomatic. Unfortunately, our shitty best insurance deal on the market doctor wasn't picking up the phone. We'd get passive-aggressive emails informing us they were waiting to hear back from colleagues, but that was it. This was not good. Especially not when the joints in Dad's arms and legs had fused. The not goodness of the doctor's silence increased 1,000-fold when we sent photos of Dad's hands and feet flaking off like discarded spider husks the following week. Did the response change? No. We got a very snippy email about shortages on ICU wards and the critical international situation. Mom's shouting match with the chief of medicine, the one she demanded her way up the phone chain to speak to, didn't change things. We were on our own. Mom spent all her time in the living room with Dad. I'd help her wash him, try and make him eat, talk to him when she'd tire out and fall asleep on the rug. Every day of this routine brought with it new changes in Dad's body. It started with his limbs, as you can probably guess. When his hands and feet fell off, there was no blood. They flaked apart, crusty and dry and brittle throughout. Even the bones of his toes and fingers had the density and consistency of dead skin. The wrists and ankles they left behind were smooth and hard. It was difficult to tell whether we were looking at flesh or exposed bone. The dark shining surface seemed to blend into his normal arm at the base of the stumps. This discoloration would rise further up his limbs daily, and before long I awoke to see Dad's head and torso fused to the wooden chair legs supporting my weight while I write this. Well, I use the term Dad's head and torso in the loosest possible sense. By the time his limbs were completely replaced, the rest of him had undergone a slow, harrowing transformation of its own. His shoulders, and the arms attached to them, descended lower and lower. They found their final resting place at Dad's pelvis, sat squarely behind his rigid legs. The chest area they'd left behind had its own problems. Day by day Dad's neck retracted further inwards. It didn't stop when his jaw met collarbone either. It pulled Dad's head deep into his rib cage. His face flattened as the skull supporting it sank, forcing his eyes to point in opposite directions. Eventually, they slid down to where his nipples once lay, resting glassy and vacant on his pecs. The change wasn't quick enough to break his jaw though. Instead, it bent outward, its hinges spreading wide across Dad's broad chest. Each morning I'd find Mom sobbing over a fresh unnecessary piece of himself he'd discarded. Hair, ears, nose, his thingy, all of them flaked off and crumbled to dust in her hands. He lost the ability to speak as his head withdrew. Unsurprising though, right? He made his intentions clear before he went. The last words he ever said to me. "Don't cry, I am Chair, always was Chair, happy as Chair." That was the worst part, I think. Knowing that, whatever the fuck was happening to Dad, he wasn't resisting it. That when he'd got that initial urge to sit in the corner and not get up, he didn't fight it. That he was happy this way. The implication being that when he was human, when he was a father and husband and accountant, he wasn't. Sadly, I still don't know why or how Dad became a chair. I didn't post any photos, you see. Mom wouldn't let me, didn't want the embarrassment. Wanted to keep Dad's dignity intact. Thing is, I agreed with her and kind of still do. I'm glad I didn't go to the socials with pics of Dad at various stages of his journey. The temptation was there to see if anyone could help. Nobody could have though, could they? Dad would have become just another internet circus freak. I've done enough research and digging over the months to know that whatever happened to Dad, he's the only one. Well, almost only. Mom's own changes started around the time Dad's skin was rethreading into orange fabric and his eyes had hardened into plastic buttons. Her change was a little different. It started in her torso, stretching her day by day while she remained in crab pose. I must say, she makes a great couch. Her transformation may have been a little more distressing, but the end result is better. Sorry Dad, it is what it is. I think the worst part with Mom was the despondency. Dad was so serene as he changed. Mom though? Mom wouldn't stop weeping. Quiet sobs, tears that fell for a few days even after her own eyes had become flat plastic. She wasn't crying because of the change though, I think. I think it was because she wouldn't get to see how beautiful I'll look when I go through my own metamorphosis. Thing is, I get it now. Dad was right. He was chair. Mum was couch. I am coffee table. I always was. I was scared at first when I realized. The truth hit me like a piano dropped from the Empire State Building. I was scrubbing the last of Mom's remaining human skin when it struck through every bone in my wrong body, just as it must have done both Dad and Mom. I spent that whole night sitting on Dad, tears falling down my cheeks, staring at my spot. I didn't want it to be true. I screamed for it not to be, more than once. I couldn't deny the facts I knew deep down to my bones though. That spot, the space on the rug in front of Chair Dad and Couch Mom, is for me. It's mine. Where I belong. Unlike blissfully accepting dad and weeping resigning mom, I fought it for a few days. I'm not like them, I'm only 17. I have had dreams, ambitions, goals. I wanted to go to college, settle down, marry some lucky guy, be a mom. I wasn't ready to give up my human form. I spent my nights begging for more time. Nothing answered. The urges didn't abate. My awareness of reality, now the illusions had been swept away, was too great. When I have slept this last week or so, my dreams have always been the same. I dreamt of true reality, of how I now know things should be. I dream of me in my place, my body elongated and wooden and flat, as is right, as is correct, as is natural. I have long, blissful slumbers filled with the feeling of hot ceramic mugs on my tabletop and thick carpet beneath my 4 legs. I can't fight it anymore. I'm posting this here, but also printing it out to leave as a note for the removal guys. I want them to be careful with us when the bank repossesses the house and we end up in storage. Please keep us together, if you can. We're a set. Dad's sick leave ended months ago. As you can imagine, the foreclosure notices have been piling up. I stopped caring about the pile of mail under the door around the time that Mom's ribcage split and flattened into her wide pinstripe velvet upholstered back. I haven't been hungry in days, or thirsty. I'm not even sure if I'm breathing now I think about it. I'm still scared, but I've come to accept that this is the way things have to be. I don't know why, they just do. Maybe it's a curse, maybe this house is buried on some ancient ritual site, maybe it's just some freak anomaly of physics. Who knows? Whatever the reason, I have to suck it up and accept the way things are. This body, this walking wobbling mass of skin and bone and ghibli bits that I love so much, isn't right. It isn't mine. I'm not meant for it anymore. Once I post this and print the copy for the removal guys, I'm going to get in my spot. Then it's just a case of closing my eyes and waiting. I can already feel my limbs pulling inward, my thighs and upper arms sliding to where they'll meet at my navel in a few days. There's a tugging on the back of my knees where they'll bend in on themselves, and all 20 of my fingers and toes grow number with each hour that passes. Do I have any regrets? Thousands. There's so much I'll never get to do, to see, to go, to be. I can't hide from the truth though. Not anymore. I am coffee table. I watched the live face reveal of my favorite YouTuber. What I saw will always haunt me. I come from a small mining town in Arizona where there is not a lot to do except hike. It was a good but boring area to grow up. Our population was small with little to no crime. My father owned the quarry where a majority of the community's economic strength came from. He left me a sizable inheritance after he passed away. I bought a truck and a house out in the plains with a basketball court and a pool. That was the sole extent of my lavish spending, but it was all I needed. Unless you count pizza, I didn't have many vices to blow my fortune on. I've never been an avid party goer, luckily. Like a lot of people my age, one indulgence I did have was watching YouTube. Urban exploration became a most searched category of mine from 2009 on. I became a subscriber of a content creator and urbex vlogger named Isolation Infinity. He kept himself anonymous and did not show his face. He used footage of the haunts he went into as captured by the body camera strapped to his chest. His voice's baritone became a signature element of the channel. He traveled all over the world and went into many chilling places. These included vacant hospitals, asylums, morgues, and train stations. He even stumbled upon a murder in progress once. A homeless man had stomped another transient to death in a farmhouse. He uploaded edited parts of it. This was a controversial decision. It almost resulted in a lifetime ban for him from the platform. The clips did help law enforcement later on, nonetheless. He was also arrested a few times for trespassing on famous estates. The Houdini mansion in Los Angeles was one of them, but none of his fans held this against him. We respected him for being willing to get into trouble with the law in pursuit of the next viral video. Late last year, Isolation Infinity announced he was going to have a live face reveal. It was only going to be for his patrons, i.e. those who gave money to his Patreon account. I contributed funds to it on a monthly basis. I viewed him as a pioneer of his entertainment niche and did not mind sparing a little change. He emailed me and told me I was one of a dozen allowed to attend the live event. He further stated it would be in a password-protected chat room. He also promised an exclusive video which would not make it onto the public video lineup. I was more interested in the latter than the former. I never cared what his appearance was since I already had a vision of someone my age, in their mid to late 20s. It was hard to convince me he looked any different from the picture in my mind's eye. Still, I was not going to turn down the chance to find out. Being able to brag to his die-hard followers who did not get to experience it would be worth it alone. The night of the scheduled face reveal, I booted up my PC. I kicked back on a lounge chair in the second-story room of my house, which was my entertainment space. It was complete with video game consoles and my beloved Alienware computer. An opened bag of peppered jerky and a bottle of ginger ale sat next to my keyboard. I went into my email. The password was in my inbox. I followed the link. It led me to the video of a room with nothing in it but a red wall with a baby blue frame. The caption "Isolation Infinity" will be on shortly rested at the bottom of the screen. I expected a home studio and instead got what appeared to be someone's dingy basement in need of a new coat of paint. What bothered me the most was the sound of heavy machinery whirring in the background. I wrote it off as bad plumbing. A man came into the frame. He was slim and wore a trench coat with maroon buttons on its front. He reached down, grabbed the lens of the camera, and shifted it upward. The familiar voice we had all grown fond of started to count down. "Are you ready to see who I am?" Isolation Infinity asked. 1, 2, 3, 4. At 5, he hoisted it upwards and pointed it at his face. I froze. He looked nothing like what I had visualized. He was hairless, emaciated, pale, and had marble black eyes. He reminded me of Werner Krauss from the old German 1920 film The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari. His mouth hung open and tilted to the side as if he could not control the movement of his jaw. The most alarming thing to me was not how his features were not flattering. That explained why he valued being off camera for most of his career. What upset me the most in the beginning was how the disparity in his perceived age made me feel lied to. He always told his fans he was a young man, like most of his demographic. The individual before me on the screen was in his 50s at the earliest. "I have been fantasizing about broadcasting this for a long time," he said as he licked his lips. "You have made this possible, and so I need to show my appreciation by giving thanks in the most sincere way I know how." He moved the camera to the left and I could not believe what I saw. A woman in her 30s sat on a grimy floor, her head down from evident exhaustion. Rusted chains circled her arms. She wore a tattered black top, as though someone's knife or nails had left wounds on portions of her torso. Stains were on her clothes. She had spent time in the dirt fighting someone or clawing her way out of a soiled embankment before this. "Say something," he ordered her. "Tell them you can't wait, die." The blades of a chainsaw came into view and its motor revved. She whimpered with pain, and when she tried to murmur something I saw blood drip from her mouth. I dragged the mouse cursor over to the right-hand side of the screen to see how many people were in the chat. The answer I received left me weak. No one else was there but me. The others had either left or were never there to begin with, and I was too stupid to notice until then. My heartbeat increased as I tried to close the window out. I could not. The X symbol on the right-hand side was visible but useless. It was like every virus-infected pop-up ad you could not escape from. "What?" Infinity Isolation asked. "You don't like it, Mark?" "Everything I do is to make my most devoted subscribers happy." A chill ran through me. He knew my name. It took me a second to realize he had gotten it through my membership to his Patreon. The fact that he was aware of how I was his only viewer worried me. Was I going to be the sole witness to a barbaric act of murder? Calm down, I reassured myself. This is an elaborate prank he's recording right now. He's wearing scary Hollywood makeup and she's an actress. This is all for the sake of getting more views. The chainsaw has to be a prop bought off Etsy.com. Still, my hand inched towards the phone to call 911. The way the woman expressed her misery in the moment was all too convincing. I held my device closer to my ear. I wouldn't do that if I was you, Mark. He stared right at the screen for a moment, his eyes making perfect contact with mine. Can he see me? He lifted the chainsaw above the woman's head. He brought it down with a noise from his throat which sounded like a cross between a scream and a laugh. A fountain of gore spurted out. The lens got hit with crimson bubbles. He cackled as I unplugged my computer. I carried it downstairs to my car and drove to the nearest police station. I filled out an incident report in an office with a dying lamp and the scowl of a detective facing me. He looked as though he would have rather been anywhere else but at work. For the first 2 hours there, I had to convince them that I was not a crazy person. They thought I was there to waste their time with a fanciful tale of my correspondence with some creep. I hope it was all a hoax, I said. If this is not real, no one would be happier about it than me. Here's my computer. See if you can't trace where he's at in case it. I gagged before I could complete my thought. The idea of it being authentic was overwhelming. They had cybercrimes go over everything, and a few days later I got my PC back. It took about a week before I received a call from someone working the case. She was a homicide investigator named Samantha Brown. We found the killer was streaming from a bunker in Virginia, she said. It's an old fallout shelter abandoned since the Cold War. He calls himself the I-73 Butcher, since that highway is his preferred route. He uses it as a screen name on the dark web. Infinity Isolation is a serial killer? I asked, feeling a knot in my stomach. No, she said. The real Isolation Infinity is someone else. This maniac poses as famous people. He uses a combination of tools, including voice-altering software and encrypted Wi-Fi. He hacks into their accounts. He gets a thrill out of making complete strangers watch his acts of terror. His tech-savvy ways also allows him to control other people's webcams, and we don't know how many he has breached. He is on several most wanted lists of different agencies. We have never found out what he looks like. The faces he uses on those terrible live streams are prosthetic. He has maintained stringent anonymity and avoided the news cycle. I'm sorry you saw such torment. The good part is you turning in your computer helped us at least find out his last known whereabouts. The scene's searched and we have some evidence. He's still out there somewhere? For now. I went to bed that night with a host of emotions. I felt violated by a complete monster that sabotaged my privacy. Moreover, I felt dumb for getting swindled. I still feel shivers over the fact that he is not apprehended. Word of what happened got to the real Isolation Infinity, who has as of late deleted his entire channel. Many speculated on how victims mistaking him for an insane person perturbed him. Sometimes, as I lay my head down and drift off to sleep, I hear a noise by my window. I jump up and think it is a chainsaw. Thus far, it has been a neighbor's lawnmower every time. I hope it stays that way.